Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. Decided to do a quick video that I'll show you. Kinda explains the true history of things and how history should be researched versus modern history that is taught in schools. So the history of, let's say, the last 500 years can be divided into three periods. Before the flood, and I'm talking about the first flood, the first world flood, between the floods, and after the flood, after the second flood or the last great flood that the world saw. So before the flood, this date should be somewhere around, if my marker was only right, 1600 of current era. Why? Well, because if you look at the Monty map, it is, if I remember correctly, was finished in 1587, I believe. And that map shows the world that is completely different from what it is today. But I also know there was a number of great catastrophes in the world before the second flood. So there had to be one more flood that changed the structure. So here you have the, let's call it Great World Civilization. So Great World Civilization existed between the year 1600. It was the civilization that covered all of the known world, whether it's flat or round, it doesn't matter, traces of which can still be found today in the architecture that's almost identical in every part of the world from the previous great civilization. So then something around here happened, and it could have happened at the year 1600, or let's say between 1600 and maybe 1700, 17th century. Something happened here, something big that destroyed the previous civilization. So then, what happened afterwards in this, after that great civilization? Well, you had the period of civil wars. As it always happens, great minds are destroyed, and those who are left, they have to divide the wealth. They have to divide the land. They have to divide everything that's left over. So you have a period of civil wars. Then you have what's called good civilization of the world. And this lasted up until the second great flood. Well, actually we should call it the second great world conflict, which began approximately in 1780, maybe earlier than that, and ended in approximately 1830. The Great Flood, as you know, was in 1824. And that flood covered most of the known world in 1824. But the conflict began much sooner. It began much earlier, in about 1780. So, and then after 1830 to approximately 1861 is a period of confusion. Again, you had your civil wars, and everything was divided between those who survived the flood. That's that. And now what we have, and this is period between 50 years, so you take up until 1917, the First World War, period of wars, again, worldwide. After 1917, dust pretty much settled. And then we have what we have right now, which Our modern civilization we can only call degenerate civilization. So how do you compare the two? Well, if you would compare it in IQ level, the great civilization would have probably, to be fair, the IQ level of, let's say, 180. They were able to achieve things we cannot even understand today. That's how to create marble by the same technology that currently we only know how to create cement. They had internet, they had flying machines that were ecologically superior, they did not harm nature. They had built tunnels, that great civilization before 1600, they had built tunnels that span across the entire world, underground, under Atlantic oceans, under Pacific Ocean, under all of the seas. You could travel from any point in the world to any other point in the world with speed that we cannot even imagine today. Probably the speed of those super trains that fly in Japan right now, like the speed of the airplanes. But they had those technologies before 1600. That's why the maps, if you can find a legit map before 1600s, they're so detailed. I mean, people say, oh, they barely invented the wheel. No, they had flying technologies. So that's why those maps are so detailed. They knew every single continent. They knew where every single city was. They knew where every single river, lake, everything was, because they had those technologies. Then something happened, Great War, followed by a number of civil wars. The population went way down, and then we had a period of in between floods, because that's also when the first great flood happened. Between floods, approximately 200 years, that's when these good civilization, they found all of the technologies from the great civilization, and let's say their IQ level was around 140 average. They knew barely how to use maybe half of all of the great technologies of that great world culture, world civilization, and they utilized them. So they still had flying technologies, they still had electricity. If you read books of that period, they mention electricity before technically electricity was developed. They could still build such monuments that we cannot copy today with even our modern technologies. So then we move on to our modern civilization, which is like right here. You had that period of unrest, nothing but wars, civil wars beginning from 1780, and lots of people died. And our modern IQ, and I'm sure you know it, is, let's say, average is less than 100. It sucks to be us, because we are the degenerate civilization. We not only we invent new technologies, but we also have to remember that those guys before 1600s, they had all of those technologies, and history has been rewritten at least several dozen times in those 200 years in between the great floods, because that great flood, showed you guys in the book in my previous videos, happened in 1824, destroyed most of Europe and probably America too. Also you have 1816 to 1819. Those are years without summer, where humanity suffered greatly, because you can call it nuclear winter. Many people starved, many people turned to cannibalism, lots of people died. So you had a long period of wars, probably like 50 years, no, probably like close to 150 years of nothing but wars, from 1780 to past World War I. And that created the degenerate civilization, because what people want to do today is, just go to social media and you'll learn what people want to do today. They're just sick in the head. and they have no clue about the previous great civilization. Many of them, like 99% or more, don't even know about the existence of the good civilization that still affected most of the world. All they know is that this history that is being taught to them today, after the year 2000, that's been written, probably all of the history that you know today has been written in 1850 plus of the modern era. So most of the history that's taught in school today has to fit that narrative that was written in the year 1850 plus. And they wrote about, they falsified anywhere between 10 and 30,000 books per year in regards to modern knowledge, wisdom, and history. So everything you know today is a complete fabrication, a complete lie. So those are three periods you should address when studying world history. Before the Great Flood, so anything before 1600s, and it's very difficult to find genuine sources on that. Like Monty map, you can spend months just looking at that map, comparing it to modern maps, and trying to derive theories of what could have happened. Then between the floods, from 1600 to about 1800, like 1780, because disasters begin to happen. The first I was able to find like 1781, when they had the killer fog that you could only compare to like a gas attack, when people just suddenly died, cattle died, everybody died. And that's when it begins and continues through all of the wars. I mean, last Great War ended what? 1945? So there you go. And right now we are the degenerate civilization that will probably end up destroying itself because we are too stupid to realize the technology that we could possibly have if the secrets would be unlocked to us. But those in power, they don't want us to be smart. Remember, like the first great civilization, everybody had an IQ of probably at least 180, because the technology that were available to them, they had social networking, they had electricity, they had teleportation, they could fly, they had everything. And you can find mentions of those in really old books. But then after that, whatever happened right around 1600s, 1700s, and destroyed the previous great civilization, those guys came along, the survivors. And like usually if you have a child survive, he has to figure out how certain technologies work. Right now it's like giving an iPad to a child without explaining how it works, expecting them to know how to use programming language. So that's kind of what happened. The guys that came along after that great civilization was destroyed, they had to figure out the technologies that were left to them, how they worked, make the best of it. And they did. They made most of them work. And that continued until about the next Great War, followed by the next Great Flood, which is right around 1780. That's when it all began. And then we came along and we're just dumb as hell. We're dumb shits. We don't know how to create flying machines, and we don't know how to do pretty much anything. We can just use. We're the using generation. Whatever is given to us, we use. We don't produce. We don't create. That's the majority of us. That's why our IQ is so low. And yeah, that's what happens. So that's kind of how you have to look at modern history. So yeah, guys, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. Drop me your comments, questions, and thank you for watching, and see you guys later.